Alrighty, welcome in everyone. We're gonna go ahead and get started. All right. Looks like we have our first question. When using a primary intake form, I have a date and time field, but the time doesn't appear in the form. Yeah, so when we talk about the fields that will show up on that intake form, so I'm just going to open up my new listing intake form. And we'll go ahead and say the team, we'll say the user. So here we pop in our address, right? And then when we get down to some of the nitty gritty details, let's say I wanted to put in the listing agreement start date. I know that in the fields, it says something like, here, we'll go over to our fields, go over to our listing details, listing agreement start date. I know in our fields, we have this, is a time required for this date? And if I change this to yes, and I say, I understand, and update, and that's updated, that's there. I know it says that. So we kind of make this assumption, okay, well, if it says that we're making it required, then on the intake form, we should see a time being requested for this as well. Unfortunately, that is not how that particular function works. I actually need to confirm with our developers the function of this. What is the point of having this question? What does this tool do? It could have been something that we were working on and then we ended up having to table for whatever reason, but I know that in this case, I know that it doesn't do what we think it should do, which is make it that a time is required here. What I would probably do in your situation, Dawn, is I would go ahead and add in an additional field if you truly need that time from that person while filling out the intake form. Because again, once that property is submitted and we're on the property and we open up that date, I'm just going to grab contract date. We can pop in a time here. But if you need that time on the intake form, we would probably want a separate field for it. You could create it as a number field. You could create it as a text field. I think text field would probably work best if you need to know the AM, the PM, right? So you would just say add field, and then here we could call listing agreement start time, just for now. Now, I don't know if it's going to let us create this because I think that start time is a part of one of the merge fields for when you actually use the time. So let's try it out though. So we're going to say that this is a text area and add field. Cool. The field was successfully created. So here you could put in, please add AM or PM, right? So that way you know whether or not it's AM or PM. But that's most likely what you're going to have to do if you're going to be requiring that agent to share a specific time with you. Again, I just grabbed a random field, date field that we were going to use. I know it's not necessarily applicable for this one because this is going to be like, this is the date that the listing agreement was signed. The time for that doesn't really necessarily matter, but this is what I would do. I would create a field for that, and then I would have that come onto my intake form whenever I need it to come onto the intake form. I'm going to go ahead and delete this because I don't want to have an excessive field, but that's what I would do. Let me see if there's any follow-up to that. Awesome. No worries. Okay. Todd, we're going to get to that. I will we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that. But I'm gonna answer. I'm gonna get everyone else's out first, because that one's one where um me and Kelly have been deliberating separately, but we're about to deliberate together on this call. Let's get Brittany's question first, though. Intake form. How do I edit the options for choose team? Good question. So up here at the top, if we are filling out this intake form, okay, so we're an internal user, we're saying add new intake form, and we're filling out an intake form, or we're saying add property intake form, and we're filling out an intake form, it's going to ask us to choose a team and choose a user, okay? If we wanted to edit the teams within open to close, we're going to go down to that gear icon. So again, I always click on my 3-line icon whenever I'm making edits to the backend. We're going to open up that gear icon. We're going to go into organization and users. Here we're going to see our team members. These are all our party members that we've invited. And then if we go to teams, this is going to be where our teams are. And we'll select add team to add on an additional team. When it comes to your guys' teams, the strategy for it, I mean, it's a toss-up. There's a couple different ways that you can handle it. I would always ask you guys, and most of you who've worked with me know that I ask you this. Who needs to see what? Okay. That's the first question you're going to ask yourself when it comes to your teams. Because if I create a team and I say that only Riley is going to be on the listing team, and let's say I have 5 users, if only Riley is on the listing team and I have that team selected here, I say listing team, and it's going to be Riley that does it. Only Riley is going to see that transaction. So let's say I had Kelly on my team as well, and sometimes Kelly needs to help out with listings. Well, I would either want to make sure that Kelly was also added to the listing team, or I would want to make sure that that particular transaction is assigned to a team that has Kelly living on it automatically, right? Already. So here, when we're looking at our teams, we're looking at who do we want on them, what do we want them to look like? You have to think first, who needs to see what? Okay, that's the first question. Once you answer who needs to see what, let's say everyone needs to see everything. I'm going to go to closing team. This is are my 2 people. They need to see everything, so they're on the same team. They can see everything. Okay. After you decide, okay, well, they need to see everything. The next question that you're going to ask yourself is, what kind of filters do I want to use to be able to review the information? So for example, I have a team that's called public intake forms. I have inbound, I have listing, I have closing, right? I could have like a listing and a under contract team. And when I go over and I look at my property tables, here I can choose a specific assigned team. Now, this is showing me that we're looking at, I think, a shared one. So let me see if I can go to my main one. Let's see, teams. This will show all my teams. Okay, so I'm not going to change it, but here, this is where we would select that particular team, and then we could select the user if we wanted to, but this would be a way that you could filter it to say, I just want to see things that are happening on this particular team. Not only just on the property table, right? But also if we go to the trigger pipeline, we're also going to be able to filter that team as well. So that's the second question. First, who needs to see what? If everyone needs to see only their transactions, then everyone needs to have their own team. Number 2, how do we want to filter the information? If we want to have it where, let's say you have agents and you want to say, well, these are my top producer agents and they are always submitting intake forms. And so I want a specific team for them where their TC or their transaction manager is assigned to it. And they're the ones that see all of those particular properties and those tasks. That's where we would want to make sure that we have a team that's called, I'm just going to pretend it's called top producer. Sir. I'm not going to be able to spell it out correctly. Not today, guys. Sorry, my brain's a little foggy. So let's just say we add in the agent's name. I also see people adding in this agent is this person. So when they submit their intake form, I want to make sure that all the transactions are assigned to this particular person. So if I say Hannah Hoxie, right? Or let's say Justin, that's one of my agents, right? Justin Hoxie, we'll add him on here. We go over to agents. Here's Justin. So when Justin fills out his forms, I want to make sure that it gets assigned to Justin. And I want to make sure it gets assigned to the TC that's on Justin's team. This is another way that you can go through and filter it. I sometimes like doing this because when we talk about pulling reports from like the property view, it can be a lot easier if we can just say, oh, I'm looking for specifically Justin's team here. And I just want to see the transactions that are assigned to him, right? It's a little different from when we go to the reporting tool here, because the reporting tool here is going to say, I want to see the transactions that have Justin assigned to him, right? So that's going to show me the report of showing me again. And let me grab a contract status. We'll say under contract. Close build report. Cool. So when we talk about reporting here, this is me saying this agent, show me all the transactions that are assigned to him. But there could be situations where the transaction is assigned to Justin, but Justin doesn't log into open and close. Or maybe we haven't invited him as an agent portal user and we still need to like like pull a report for who he is or like what transactions he's had on him. It's not just about using the reporting tool here. It's also about using the tool here. Or maybe you have it that you've got like 5 agents and you've got 3 TCs and you want to make sure that if one of the TCs is out, they take care of that other agent for that TC. Being able to have your teams split up like this will make it easier for you to go, well, Hannah's on it right now, but Hannah's going to be out for a while. So I'm going to add Riley to it. And I'm going to make sure that Riley has the roles that she needs to have to be able to do her job. She's going to be the transaction coordinator now, compliance specialist, and email specialist. And so now I know the tasks are going to be associated with her correctly. And when I go, okay, I want to remove Riley because she doesn't need to be on Justin's team anymore, then what I can do here is I can click on my trash can icon, and then I'm just going to reassign it back to Hannah who's on there. So I'll say Justin, and I'll say Hannah, and then I'll say Justin, and then I'll say Hannah. And now I'm setting it up that I'm reassigning those transactions from Riley, anything that's an intake form or anything that's a property, and I'm reassigning it to Hannah to remove Riley from that transaction. Okay. So when we're talking about our teams, the 2 questions that you're going to ask, who needs to see what? And number 2, do we need to um, consider anything for reporting? Like, do we want to be able to pull a specific report for the properties based off that person? Because maybe, again, we don't have that particular agent in our system just yet. Maybe we're going to get them in the system, right? So we want to split them up ahead of time. That way we can make sure to go through it. Sometimes I'll see teams split up as like, depending on how big your brokerage is or depending on the size of your team, I'll see teams split up to say, this is my California team or this is my Arizona team. Sometimes I'll see it if we're in a specific state. I'll see it as like, this is my Southwest team. This is my Northern team. This is my Eastern team, right? So it just kind of depends. I usually recommend, again, like it's really about transparency. Who needs to see what? That should be your first thing. And then from there, you can kind of build out the teams that you need. You're not going to break anything by creating too many teams. Okay. All you might do is find yourself going, I don't need a Justin team. So let me go to users. I'm going to delete this and I'm going to reassign anything back to Hannah on the closing team. Okay. This is me taking everything that might have been assigned on Justin's team, reassigning it to a different user on a different team or the same user on a different team. We'll delete that. And then we can go here and we can delete that team. We can say we don't need Justin's team anymore. Okay.
Hannah, I know
Yes.
there's a great use for that public intake forms team that I see right there.
Mm-hmm.
Could you touch on that really quickly? Just briefly to let everybody
Yeah.
know
Yeah, absolutely. So
why
if you
you
guys
have
are
that.
considering using a public intake form, you guys kind of saw this. I've got like agent submitted, team brokerage submission notes, right? Whenever we talk about a public intake form, when a public intake form is submitted, it needs to be assigned to a specific person. Okay. So if we head over to our hammer icon into templates, we go into intake form templates and we just open up our buyer's residential and we go down to public form. You'll see here that we need it to be assigned to a specific team and a specific user. So having a public intake form team and then assigning that user to it, that's going to make it easier for you to know that's where these intake forms are coming from. They're coming from this link that's available on my website, that's available on my app, that's available or that's tagged in my signature line. And so now you know, okay, cool. Well, any intake forms that were submitted are going to be submitted and they'll be assigned to Riley. Now, Riley's job could possibly be she's going to review that public intake form and go, is this a legit or not legit property that I need to approve and get into open and close? And Riley can reassign that property out to the appropriate team member after that. Okay. So the idea is that they submit the intake form. Riley looks at it. She goes, yeah, this is one of my agents. We're going to do this intake form, right? Because that public link, it's available to anyone. If I grab this link right now and I share it, it's available. Like you guys can start grabbing it. You can start filling out this intake form right away if you wanted to. and start submitting intake forms to my account. So it's good to have this separation that way okay, well, anytime it was submitted, this is who it was from. I want to say, Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong. I want to say in activity, we should see if it was like reassigned, right?
I want to say yes too. I guess
Let's try
why
to
don't you try
reassign it.
it? That's what I was
Yeah,
thinking.
let's
Right
let's reassign
there.
it.
You're there.
Yeah, you're right. So here it says like team user Riley, the team is public intake form. So let's say Riley's saying, I want to reassign this to someone else. So I clicked on where it says agent portal user. If you guys see it say something different, it might say something like created by. Okay. So it could look a little different from there. But for this one, let's say, we have it assigned to an agent portal user. We're going to click on manage property access. We're going to say reassign property. And now I can say, okay, I'm going to assign it to the closing team. This is actually Hannah's on the closing team, right? So that's Riley reassigning it. Let's see if it's underneath there. Fingers crossed. I think it should be. No, it's not. So that's one of those things where, again, like this is where I kind of, and Kelly, we should probably make a note of it. This would be a great thing to be able to have on our activity, right? We're always trying to figure out ways that we can improve transparency. I think this would be one of those ways to see when it was rescheduled or who it was rescheduled or not rescheduled, sorry, reassigned to see when it was reassigned and who it was reassigned to. Cool.
Yeah, because Jill is saying that it did show. So I wonder if what if you go back into the property and check it out again?
Access,
For
activity.
activity.
Mm.
Oh, it just said you opened it. Interesting.
If Jill saw it though,
Hmm.
I don't think it would be underneath access. It would have to be underneath activity. That's where I would have
That's
to see
it.
it.
Yeah, she said maybe a few years ago. I could swear too.
I could have sworn it was down there. I could
Yeah.
have sworn there was a
Me
way to
too.
track
And so
when it
is
was
Jill.
reassigned. Well, maybe it's notifications.
Oh, maybe
Nope.
so. No. Oh,
Nope. Thought it was
I'm
notifications.
gonna
It's
make a
not
note of that
notifications.
though.
But yeah, we'll make a note of it because it's one of those pieces where, again, if we can have more transparency into where these transactions are going, that would be great. And there could be something unique about me logging into my specific setup where I don't see it because, again, I do have admin permissions, right? I do a little bit more into the system than you guys, so there could be something with that too. But probably take a look at that. Okay, cool. Can you also go over form conditions and the best practices with them? Yes, we can. Let's take a look at form conditions. So form conditions are specifically used on our intake forms, okay? Form conditions are always used with choice fields, and form conditions can be used to say when we say yes to something, when we say no to something. It can be used when we say that there's a tenant occupying the space, or there's an owner, or it's vacant. So I want you to keep in mind that any kind of choice field can be a good prospect for a form condition. Now, what is a form condition? A form condition is a tool that will allow you to dynamically add fields, contact roles, ask for documents, or add instructions internally when a user is processing the intake form. So if we take a look at this buyer's residential one, I've got quite a number of form conditions on here. When I click on condition action map, and for any of you guys who are new and you're taking a look at your open to close account and you're like, form conditions feel really like a lot. What I usually recommend is click on the condition action map so you can see what they do. So I'm going to click on that. And that's going to expand those conditions for me. If you can see, I can't edit them when I'm looking at them. This is just me going through and validating that they're showing up the way they need to. So I'm going to use this one right here as an example. I'm going to highlight it. So it says, if the field, are there any seller paid closing costs is equal to yes. And then here it says dynamic field and it adds on seller concessions and it's required. So the way that this form condition works is that I'm saying that when I have someone who's filling out the intake form, agent, internal user, whoever, public person, whoever's filling out that intake form, I'm saying that when they say yes, there are seller paid closing costs, then I want to ask for the seller concessions right after that. Below that one, we can see it says, is there a loan equal to yes? Then it brings on the loan application due days, the loan approval due days, and then also adds a contact role. So it's saying, well, if we say that there's a loan, I need to know who the lender is, right? The lender is not applicable in all transactions. That lender, he's appropriate when we say that there's a loan. If it's a cash deal, though, I don't need his information because we don't have a lender, right? But I might need, so if we say, no, there is not a loan, right? I might need to ask, well, I need to know the proof of funds, right? So maybe we're asking for an additional document. Maybe we're saying that the proof of funds needs to be due by a specific time. And so we need to ask another days field, right? So that's kind of how we can use these. I'm going to scroll down and see if I have a tenant occupancy one because a lot of these are yes. Oh, here's an example. So here we have this one that says if the referral fee or is it referral fee or percentage? And I said if it's equal to flat fee, right? So I say that it's a flat fee, then it's going to ask for that flat fee amount. Or if I say it's a percentage, it's going to ask for that percentage. So the idea behind your form conditions is that when you say this, what do you want to have happen next? Do we need more fields? Do we need to ask for a contact? Do we need to add internal instructions? Do we need a document? Another one that I've seen really common, and I don't see it on this one, so I'll just build it out as an example for you guys. Oh, wait, here I see it now. Well, let's still do it. Let's still do it out. Well, maybe I have another one. Let me take a look at this. Hmm. We do home warranty. I don't have home warranty on here. Home protection plan offered. Nope, I do. See, the thing about when you go into an account that's already built out, you don't really have very many examples of what else you can build other than building it again. There's nothing wrong with building it again. Let's say,
I
let's
don't
say we
see
need,
well. You've got
oh, you don't
septic.
see well?
I don't see well. Or
I
I
see,
don't know if
I
so,
don't know if I have anything for well. Let me see.
you probably don't have anything for solar either, because that's kind of a,
But you know what? Solar has been really popular. So let's do
it
solar.
has.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Okay. So how do we build this out? I want to add in solar into my what's called. Let me see if there's any other questions on here. Okay, good. So how do I build this out? Hannah, I'm starting to take care of solar. Okay. So I need to start asking, is there solar on the property? And then I need to know if it's what have I seen primarily? Like leased or if it's owned. And then I also
Yep.
need to know if,
There's
oh yeah,
either none or it's seller leased or seller owned. And then, because there's different processes if it's seller or if it's leased or if it's owned. And then, of course, if there's none. And there's different processes for HOA too sometimes.
that's true. We could do HOA as well. I'm trying to think, what are the other fields that we would need for solar? So do you see how me and Kelly are kind of we're talking back and forth about what else do we need for this? How can we best approach this question? For when it comes to is there solar on the property? I don't know if we necessarily need a start question. Is there solar on the property? Yes or no, right? We might actually be able to get away with adding in a field that says, is there solar to start? Okay, this is our choice field. And instead of us building out it yes or no, we could first say, yeah, it's seller leased, or yes, it's seller owned, or none, right?
I usually have a fourth one too, or yes, but HOA like controls it or something like that. Yes, HOA owns.
Or included in HOA.
That's a good one too.
There we go. I think that one will work. So here now we have a couple options, right? I usually recommend click on your purple stars if you need them to show up on the intake form. If you're asking this question of our agent, we want to make sure that these purple stars for these choices are selected. That way they show up. If the purple star is not selected, you're not going to see it on that intake form. So the first step for us adding in our solar process, we don't have this, we're building it out, is we want to make sure that we have those questions first. So we're going to go to our field editor and we're building out our questions right now. The way that I usually like to order these is based off of what I see common. So usually it's seller leased or it's going to be none because there is no solar or it's seller owned or maybe it's included with an HOA, right? Depending on where you're at, it depends on what you guys might have. You might not have it included with HOA at all. You might not have it where you ever own it, right? I think my parents own it, but it's a toss up, honestly. I haven't talked to them about how they got their solar panels, but I know that they have them, right? So having questions like this will help you out with making sure that you get the appropriate addendum. So first thing is we build out the fields. Once we build out the fields and the questions here, I usually like to update and have those radio display options. That to me is what I usually like. I don't really like the drop downs because then I have to click on the drop down, select the option, save the option, and that can be time consuming, right? So here I'm going to say, yes, I want radio buttons. Yes, I want them to be stacked. And stacked is just so it says 1, 2, 3, 4 in a again in this order here versus if I say it's not stacked, it's going to be side by side. So it'll go yes, no, side by side instead. So I like stacked personally. I'm going to scroll to the bottom, say I understand, and update. Now, let's say when I say that there is solar, that I need to know the due dates for solar, right? Maybe there's like a deadline. I need to receive those documents by a particular deadline. Or depending on whether it's owned or leased or the HOA, maybe there's something additionally that I need to do. I'm correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly, do we see solar inspections, right?
I don't here in California,
Okay. I'm
but
trying
that
to
doesn't
think of
mean you can't have them. I mean,
have
I've
them.
heard
Yeah.
of it.
I'm trying to think of the last time I worked with solar and with you guys, it was primarily we were just trying to make sure that we had that document. If it was a lease, we needed to have the solar lease because we needed to transfer it from the current owners to the new owners, right? Or if
Yeah.
it was owned, then that makes it a little bit easier. We just need to
Yep.
have the documentation of, well, it's no longer owned by this person, it's now owned by this person, or, when did it get purchased, right? So you can know, okay, well, when is it going to need maintenance? Um, or is maintenance needed on it? How long has it been since maintenance happened? That can be something that's a contingent on your guys's. Uh, I don't know if it's super common right now though, because solar's kind of popping off. It's gotten a little popular recently, I would say in the last like 10 years. I feel like solar's gotten much more popular than what it was before. Um, but the idea is that what else do we need? What else do we need to track? And that's where you're going to determine whether or not you need more field sections. Now, the next part of this is deciding where do we want those field sections to be? Do we care about this information on the listing? Or if it's a buyer purchasing a house, right? You need that information on your under contract details. Okay. So that's the next part. We asked our question and now we might need to track some due dates for it. So I need to figure out, am I putting this underneath my listing details or my under contract details? I typically recommend that you guys have your fields broken out in this way. This is what I found to be most successful for clients, where we have like an intake form questions section, transaction details. That's usually everything that's under contract, regardless whether it is, regardless whether or not it's a seller's or a buyer's, it's everything that's under contract. Our listing details, right? And then commission details if you want it on a separate tab, because sometimes we don't want commission details to be seen. So sometimes all of these purple stars are unselected. Okay. Maybe the only ones that are selected are us asking for like, tell me how much this fee is, or tell me what your flat fees are, right? But some of the other stuff like the brokerage fees or maybe the split total or maybe the totals, right? Maybe that's internal fields that we're going to keep track of, but we don't need to necessarily show it in the portal. Because again, these purple stars show it up in the client portal as well. So it's not just about showing it in the agent portal. This makes it visible across all platforms, whether it's a client portal, agent portal, or it's Follow Up Boss. Okay. So I usually recommend, have them broken up like this. And then I have another field group where I was doing some testing and work with this, but we're going to ignore that for now. Really, these are the main four that I would see. So if I realize, okay, I'm only going to need one date, my next step is realizing or is trying to think out, is it going to be a date that has a days field with it, or is it a hard coded date? So what does it say on my contracts? If it has a days field, then I'm going to need two fields. If it is a hard coded date, every single time when I say that there's solar, it's due on this particular date, and it's always going to be a date. then I only need one field. And now I need to determine where I'm going to put that. So you can see here, I've got seller concessions up here. I don't really want to have a whole field section with one field in it that says seller concessions. I might not want a field section that only has two fields in it that say solar due days, solar due date. Okay. So now I have to determine where I want to put it. I can put it underneath critical details. I can put it underneath property details. I could even bury it underneath one of these other field sections if I really, really wanted to. Now, I usually recommend not adding it to a field section where if you don't need it, it doesn't come on, right? If we look at due diligence details, you don't see any mention of septic or well because I don't want those to be in the same field section because I don't want them to come onto the property if we say that there's no septic or there's no well. When we talk about making things easier for yourselves in the setup process, it's really about figuring out, okay, well, how many fields would I need to remove from this field section so I don't have an excessive number of fields on the property? Okay. So for me, in my case, I'm going to go ahead and add it into my property details, right? It's specific to the property. It's not necessarily a critical detail, I think, for me. So I'm going to say, we'll put it underneath my property details. So I'll go ahead and say solar, oh, if I can spell, solar due days. And I might want to pop it in so that it matches my same kind of, format that I have for my other fields. So I'm going to add in that dash. And then I'm going to go ahead and remove any excessive spaces out of my merge field. So all I did was copy this and paste it here. I know that where it says my merge field, this can be kind of confusing for you guys. I want you to make sure that you're grabbing whatever the field label is and making that the merge field here. And again, remove your excessive spaces. We don't need more than one underscore in this area. Okay. So here, once we have this on here, we're going to show field type, and I'm going to say I want it to be a number. If it's a days field, it's always going to be a number. It's never going to be yes, no. It's never going to be a word. It's always going to be a number. So I'm going to go ahead and say number and say add field. So here we can see it added it to the top. I'm not done yet. I'm going to go ahead and say I want to add on another field, and I'm going to say solar due date. And again, if I wanted to follow the same kind of, look that my other fields have, I might want to pop in that little dash. I could also not do it because I know I have it. It's kind of a toss up, right? This is the due date. This is the days field. So it's really up to you guys on how you want it to look. All of this is customizable. So I want you to feel comfortable putting it in there if you want to, or not having it in there if you don't want to. So I'm not going to put it in there in my case. I'm going to grab that field label. I'm just highlighting it on my keyboard because I'm on a PC. I'm saying Control C. If you're on a Mac, you're going to do Command C. And then I'm pasting it in there, either Control V or Command V. Okay. That's just me using some shortcuts instead of having to right click and then paste it from this guy right here. Right. I'm going to go down to field type and I'm going to say date and then I'm going to say add. Now I've added on my solar days, my solar due date. I'm going to want these to show up on my intake form. So I'm going to click on my purple stars. And if I want to share that solar due date as a calendar date that shows up on like the agent's calendar, the buyer's calendar, the lender's calendar, anyone, if I need to have that show up, I'm also going to want to click on that date icon. So right now it's gray. When I select it, it's going to turn purple and have that little purple check mark. That will tell me that this is now going to be available to automatically go on to people's calendars. Okay. So that's all this does is saying, I want to automatically add this to the API calendar. I'm now going to reorder it because I don't need it up here at the top, right? I'm going to go ahead and say that I want to drag this all the way down to the bottom. Or maybe I want to put it underneath property type, right? So I'm going to put it in whatever order makes the most sense to me. I'm going to go ahead and actually drag it to the bottom because I think that's probably best for it. Now that I have it at the bottom here, I've created my fields. I have my question, I have my due date. So now I need to make sure I get it on my intake form. So I'm going to go ahead and say exit out of my field editor. We're going to go down to my hammer icon into templates. We're going to go to intake form templates and I'm going to add it to my buyer's residential. So I'm going to select edit. Now, what's the first thing that I do here? I'm not going to go to my form conditions quite yet because I need to make sure I'm asking that question first. Is there solar on the property? So I'm going to scroll down. Is there solar? I'm going to go ahead and select yes. I want to make it required by my agent. And I'm also going to select it on the internal side. Okay. So this is me saying, I want this to show up on the intake form. This is what that agent field means. I want to make it required that they have to fill it out when they're filling out the intake form. And then I also, on the opposite side, on the right-hand side, I'm saying I want that answer to come onto the property. Okay. For these fields, usually I would say we would want it to come onto the property every single time because I'm going to use is there solar in a bunch of other places. It's not just going to be for this intake form. I could use this to add on my task templates. I could use this to populate my property triggers. I could use this as conditions for my smart blocks. Okay. So it's not just as simple as like, oh, well, I'm going to ask. And if they say no, I don't want it on there. Well, we probably want it on there even if it says no, just in case you need to change it. Let's say you said no initially, right? And then you find out later on, actually, they do have solar on property and it is leased or it's owned by the HOA. Okay. So we need to track that document. So that's my first step. Locate the question and ask it. I'm then going to highlight that question and copy it. Now, I'm not going to go to my transaction details and select anything here because the only time I need this solar due days to come on is when I say solar's on the property. Okay. So I'm going to scroll up and now I'm going to go to form conditions. So I added on my question. I said, I want this to ask every single time. I'm going to go to my form conditions now and I'm going to say add condition. Once I've selected add condition, I'm going to say the condition type. It's always going to be property field for our form conditions. Then I'm going to go ahead and here, this is going to show me all of the choice fields that I have. So you can see I've got sign installation type in here, property access details, referral company or agent, outcome call, decision outcome. So I've got quite a number of choice fields. If we scroll up to the top, here I see is there solar. But the reason that I copied it is because sometimes I have a lot more choice fields than you think. And so sometimes it's easier to just search for that particular choice, right? It's easier for me to type in solar or for me to search for that particular verbiage so that I can then say, I want to grab that property question. Once I select that, below that, we're going to choose the operation. And when we're talking about our form conditions, we're always working with equal to. We're always saying if it's equal to what? Then I want things to come on. You're not going to do something where it says, well, if it's not equal to this, then I want XYZ to come on. I always recommend working in positives. When I say it's this, then I need this. Okay. So we'll say equal to, and then here we choose whichever option we need to. So if it's days, right? Let's say it's seller leased. And that's when I need the days field because I need to make sure that I get that document transferred over, that lease updated so that now we have it for the new seller or for the new buyer so that when they move in, they're the ones that owned it. Okay. So let's go ahead and say it's seller leased and I'll say add. And I'm going to go ahead and say close. If I needed to add on more firm conditions, let's say I needed to do a transfer of ownership as well, or I needed more, or I just needed to know the due days if it's for HOA too. Okay. Then I could actually go through this again, say property field. It's going to reset, look for is there solar? I'm going to select that one, choose the operation. It's always going to be equal to. And then now I can choose my other option. If I say, well, it's included with HOA, I just need to confirm that that document's there. And again, it's due on that particular solar due date. Maybe it's due outside of the HOA documents due date, and instead it's due on that solar date instead. Okay. So here I'm saying add again. And now at the top, you're going to see I have two form conditions. One of them says if the solar is equal to yes, seller leased. And the other one is the solar equal to yes, included with HOA? Maybe I need to ask for my due days on both of these options. And so I'm going to build out a form condition for each of these. My next step is to click on edit actions. Here I can see where I can dynamically add fields, contact roles, ask for that document, and internal instructions. You guys are probably going to hear this question, and it's exactly what I say every single time. If it is an HOA, okay, is that document included with your RPA or your purchase contract? Okay. If it's included in it, we don't need to ask for it to be separate. We can split it up ourselves for the agent if we'd like to. If you tell me, Hannah, it's a completely separate document, like it's never included with the purchase agreement, it's a completely different PDF that they're going to have to upload themselves, then I would say, okay, well, we need that, like solar leased by HOA, whatever that document is called, right? Or HOA solar or whatever it is, right? Then we might need to ask for it. But if you tell me that it's included with the main documents, I don't want you asking for a document that's already included with that 40-page contract. Okay. We can split that document when we receive it. Part of your job with open and close is you're going to be a field filler, a document filer, and an email reviewer. So that second step, document filer, that's going to be where you're going to look through and go, cool, these are all the documents. Let me make sure I split them up appropriately so that when I need to send this out for signatures or someone asks for it, I already have it split up for me. So here underneath dynamically add fields, I'm just going to look for solar and I'm going to look for due days. I'm not going to ask for the date. If you're in a state where you don't ask for the days on your contract, it doesn't say solar is due 14 days after contract acceptance, 12 days after contract acceptance, then you might not need this days field. You might need the hard-coded date. So you might need to swap it out and say that you do need the date. Maybe you have it where it's either or, Hannah. Well, sometimes they put in the days field, sometimes they put in the date field. I usually recommend for that one, save yourself the effort, put both of them on there. Because if it's on the contract, even if your agent decides to skip this over, right? Because we don't want to make both of these required. Then they're going to have to put in some phony days field or some phony date field. So we don't want to have both of these required. I'd rather have them there. And if the agent knows, they put it in. And if not, then your team can put that in. They're going to know that there's a solar because when they're reviewing their fields, they're going to go, cool, I need to fill in my fields, field filler, field updater, right? So here we'll go ahead and say that we need both of these for this one. But if it's solar leased, then I just need the days field for that solar. I'm going to add that on there and I'm going to make it required. And now if I click on condition action map, you can see how we have that on there. So we built out the field to ask whether or not we needed it. We built out the due dates for it so that we can make sure we receive that document in the right time, or so that we have a date that pops up for us so that we can build out task templates to work around that date, so we can share that date with other people, so we can bring it into email templates. That's the idea behind the date. If you need to use it, you need to add it into open and close. Okay, if you're sharing it, you need to add it into open and close. If you just need to know it internally, you need to add it into open and close. Okay. Now that we have those on there, we're now looking at the next step. Well, Hannah, these are going to add it to the intake form. How do I make sure it comes onto the property? And this is probably one of those parts where I think a lot of people will end up going, I built out the form conditions, but solar still wasn't coming onto my property. I don't know what I did wrong. Okay. So what is the next step? The next step for me, when I know that I've built out a form condition to only bring on these fields based off of a condition, I'm going to head over to my form triggers next. And I'm going to say that when this is submitted, I want to add or remove, specifically adding. I always work in addition. We always want to work in the positive. That's what makes it easier, because then we all know, cool, everything on my intake form, it should be adding it to the property versus, well, it's going to remove it if it doesn't need it, right? I always like to work in addition. So here I'm going to say it needs to add or remove a field, and we'll say add. It's going to ask me what fields do we want. I'm going to type in solar. I don't need to ask this question because I already have it selected in my fields on my intake form. That's going to come on every single time. Instead, I'm going to say, well, these two only come on when I say that it is leased or I say that it's owned by the HOA. And maybe I also need it if it's going to be seller owned as well. Okay. So here I'm going to add those two. I'm going to select add. Here's bringing on those fields. I don't need to update whether it's internally required or not. I can just have it come on to the property. I'm going to go ahead and say close. We're going to turn on this trigger. I'm going to click on my trigger options to expand it. And then I need to add on a condition. The same condition that I used on my intake form is probably going to be the same condition that I'm going to use here. So if I scroll down, you'll see, are there any seller? That's not a good example. Is there an HOA equal to yes? Then it brings on the HOA details. Okay. Right. Because we only want HOA to come on when we say that there's an HOA. So that's a form trigger, an example of an intake form trigger to bring on those fields. This guy is going to work the same exact way, only we're going to use some different kind of logic for it. So we're going to say add condition. Our type is going to be a property field. Our field is going to be, is there solar? Now, when we come to our operation, for this one, because we have other options other than yes and no, right? We have none, there is no solar on the property. And then we have, well, it's leased or it's owned or the HOA owns it. Okay. So what I'm going to say is as long as it's not equal to none, okay, it's a double negative. As long as it's not equal to none. So if it's equal to leased, if it's equal to owned, if it's equal to HOA, then I want this to come on. Okay. As long as it's not equal to none. If it's equal to none, I don't need it. That's what this particular set of logic means. And I'm going to say add. Now, this is probably one of the hardest concepts for you guys to grasp at the beginning. So take your time with it, okay? There's no rush. You're not going to break anything if you do it this way, or if you set it up and you go, I think this is going to work. What I would recommend is write out how you want things to show up on your property. And then if you really need some help, obviously Wednesday workshop's a great place to come. You can say, Hannah, I built this out. This is what I did. This is what the logic is. This is what I'm seeing. Okay. Maybe things aren't populating correctly. And then we can kind of triage it together. You can also reach out to support and say, hey, support, I'm working on my form conditions to bring on them onto the intake form. And I'm working on my form triggers to make sure they come onto the property. And I'm just worried that I didn't do my conditions right. Can you take a look? And our support team can take a look. And if our support team goes, I'm not sure how you want to have this happen, they'll ask you. Number one, they'll ask clarifying questions, but also if they really need help, they'll loop either me or Kelly or even Jill in to the conversation so that we can help you guys out with this more complex logic. So I always like to add in my details. I'm going to add solar dates. And the reason I do that is because if I ever need to sort my triggers, which I might need to sort my triggers if I want to make sure they populate in the right order and I don't have to worry about slowdown, right? So I might want to add that in there so I know what that particular one does. But after this, now I need to ask myself, do I need a task template for this? Like to reach out for the documents. Maybe I need a task that just says, ensure we've filed the solar documents appropriately, or make sure that we've received all signatures for solar, make sure that solar has been transferred appropriately, or whatever it ends up being, right? So if I need to build out a task template, I'd build out a task template. And then I'd come over to my intake form and I'd say, when it's approved, that's usually what I do for my task templates. We want it to come on based off of approval. I want to add or remove a template. And then I'm going to use the same exact logic as what I used for this one, right? Unless, of course, you say, well, if it's equal to HOA, I don't need the tasks because the HOA handles that. I just need to know that HOA is the one that owns it. And then I'll know that it's going to be in the resale package or it's going to be in that HOA package. Okay. So you might need to change the logic based off of what that answer is. If you say, well, I need the task if it's leased, then you might need to say if the solar is equal to leased, that's when you have a specific task that says ensure that it has been transferred appropriately to the new buyer. Okay. Right. Maybe that's what your task is. Or if you say the solar is owned, then you just need to confirm that you've received that document showing when it was installed or whatever types of documents that might need to be required so that that buyer is informed and they know what kind of products they have on their property, right? So this part, I think that this is where, again, it's best if you write it out. It's best if you go, well, if I say it's leased, what do I need to do? If I say the HOA owns it, what do I need to do? If I say the seller owns it, what do I need to do? And if all three of those answers are different, then we need three different task templates. If you only need one task template for one instance, then we want to make sure as long as it's equal to that particular instance, then I need it to come on. Let me see if there's any questions, because I know that that's a little difficult. I want to see if there's any follow-up to that. I don't think I see anything. So it looks good. Okay. Okay. Sweet. Kelly, anything to add with that?
No, I was just thinking you did really well. Because yeah, if you have three task templates that have to come on separately, you have three triggers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or it yeah, you have
Document
three
templates
triggers.
too.
I
If you
know.
want separate document templates. So
Document templates you may have. You might
property
even have
triggers.
different emails that go with each of those tasks, or even
Mhm.
trigger templates. If you're on scale and have trigger, you might have three different trigger templates, or you could build it out one solar. So it could go different ways.
There's a couple different ways for the build out after that. That's where, especially, so this is kind of why I usually recommend when you guys get started in open and close that we start off with taking a look at our task templates first,
Yes.
because task templates are usually a lot easier to get in. When we start talking about trigger templates, just like Kelly said, I mean, you could have like one solar task, one solar trigger template and have all four emails that you need on it. Or you could have a solar trigger template with them individually if you don't want to have that many triggers. Like there's so much thought that goes into what's the next step for this. It just depends. It depends on how you want to build it. And
And
that's
then
kind
the
of where
fun
we
part
come
is
in.
testing.
Yeah, and the next
Oh,
part is testing and making sure that it actually populates correctly, right?
yes.
So there's a lot with it, and I think that anyone who's interested in converting to scale, I'm definitely talking with leadership about starting a workshop. Maybe we do 4 weeks of how to convert myself to scale, right? And we can talk about the best practices and the way to get into scale if we want to, because I know that some of you guys are like, all right, Hannah, the tasks have made things easier, but I'm starting to find myself working 10-hour days again. And I'd love it if I didn't have to check off a task to have an email go up, to review the email, to send it out. I would love it if when I updated this field, when I put on this document, when I added on this contact, an email automatically came up, right? Anyone who's saying that to themselves, that's when you're going to probably start looking into scale and trying to figure out, okay, what does converting to scale look like? How
Or
does that
even the
work?
or even the opposite too. If this doesn't happen by this date, if I haven't changed this field, if I don't
Mm-hmm.
have this document, if this
Mm-hmm.
contact doesn't, so it kind of it's twofold. It's yes, it's there, or I made the change, or no, I haven't made the change by this time.
Yep. And then, or it could be, I want a reminder to go out until I receive it. And
Yes.
I want, every day I want to be able to send out a new email. How do I build that out? And that's again, where working with us in implementation and optimization, where we're going to be able to help guide you on the best practices for it. You're not going to be able to build out everything perfectly the first time. Okay.
Oh,
It's about
oh,
building out what you need. And then as those scenarios come up, continuing to build out and improve your system. I typically find people, it depends on how many transactions you do too. Keep that in mind. When I give you guys this timeline, when I say it takes 3 to 6 months, it depends on how many transactions you get. If you get a ton of transactions in the first 3 months, you're probably going to be able to either update your system really quickly, or you'll be so flooded with the amount of transactions that you're taking on, it might take you up to 6 months to make all the adjustments that you need so that you can see that ease in the future. But the idea is that while you guys are getting started with open and close, the reason that it's complex is because the processes that you guys are tracking are complex. And we want to make sure that we have the correct setup and the correct tools for you guys to be able to address that appropriately. So working with us is probably, usually I would say it's the best solution. Um, that was a long, in-depth review of form conditions and form triggers. Let me see if we have any other questions. Intake form, how do we revise the contract status question? I have a different intake form for an escrow buyer and an escrow seller. I would like the contract statuses for each. Is this possible? I would not have it separate. I actually just recently talked with a client about their contract statuses. Let me go over to my contract status. This client had buyer under contract. And then they had another one that was called seller under contract. And I said, well, hold on. We already know it's the seller. We already know it's the buyer from the contract client type. Why do we need it in the status as well? Technically, when they both go under contract, they're both under contract. And so you would know whether or not they were a buyer or seller based off of the contract client type. So I wouldn't have a seller under contract, a buyer under contract. I would just have an under contract status. And the way that I know whether it's seller escrow or buyer escrow is based off of the client type. Okay. So that's my first thing that I'd say with this. Part two of this is, unfortunately, I can't hide these statuses based off of what intake form you're filling out. So if you're filling out the residential one, this is the same field that you're going to fill out for, or I'm sorry, under contract, right? You're under escrow intake form. If you're filling that out, this is going to show the same fields as if you were filling out a listing intake form too. What I would probably recommend though is come in here and see what status do I actually need to have show up on my intake form? Because you do not need all of these, right? The agent or whoever's filling out that intake form does not need to see contract terminated, closed, withdrawn, or listing under contract. They might need to see pre-MLS and active. It just depends on at what point you're stepping into the process. For the most part, though, I think you guys could probably get away with having just under contract showing with that purple star and pre-MLS showing with that purple star because most of you guys are getting it that cool, the listing agreement's been signed, and now it's my job to go through and get that MLS built out. So it's pre-MLS. And then when it goes active, I'm going to update it on the property to say now it's active. Right. So instead of you thinking, oh, okay, well, I need two separate contract statuses because I only want this to show up for this, or I only want this to show up for this. Remember that this field is shared across every intake form. It's also a required field. So what does this mean? This is one of our 8 mandatory fields within our system. This field works with more than just updating the contract status. It has some automation tied to it on the property. So when I go to a property and I change this contract client type to closed and I say update, you can see that there's more things that happen with it. So I don't want 2 versions of contract status, one that's going to be for when I'm doing the listing or one that's going to be for when I'm doing, buyers under contract. I want to make sure I'm using the one that's hard coded and built into open to close. That way I can have some of this automation. It also works when we go over to our properties, here contract status. If we had a duplicate version of it, we wouldn't be able to use that duplicate version when it comes to our filters on our properties, on our task pipeline, on our trigger pipeline. We would not be able to use that property status or that contract status. It looks like the language in these are different. Can we make a note of that? Because I think maybe we should
Yeah,
probably talk
that is
about
it.
either
Yeah.
having it as contract status or property status. maybe,
I'll grab
maybe
that.
some consistency.
Um, Another tip that I was going to say is I know the issue comes in when you're like, but I only want my agent to choose this. Like I just want them to see these because I only want them to choose these. One thing that I did and I found really helpful was to move the ones that I wanted to the top. Our agents are running through these
Hmm.
really fast, or even us as TCs, we're filling it out really fast. Um, I only want my agents to, here it is right in front of you, pick it. I know there's a big old list. I know I used a list. I change it. That's totally fine. But I only wanted my agents to see, yeah, listing pre-MLS or under contract, but I knew I could only use this one field. So I pushed those all the way to the top. So that way they would see, oh, here's the one I want and move on and not think twice about it. Of the 60 agents that I worked with, I only had one that it never failed. She always scrolled through the list and picked the one of what it actually was in a sense, like especially for the listings,
Hmm.
what it actually was. And so I just knew when I got an intake form from her, it was just one of my steps before I approved. I needed to make sure that my contract status was where I wanted it versus what she put in there. But that's 1 out of 60. It was so much easier. The rest of them all picked the one at the top.
Yep. So I say whatever your most common is, just like Kelly was saying, whatever your most common one is, have that one in the top. And that's why I have under contract at the top of this. That's one of the reasons why. Now, obviously, there's room for improvement and there's conversations about how we can make things improved. And I would love it. I would love it. And I know you guys would love it too, since we're being so specific about our intake forms. And we say that if it's a buyer's intake form or a seller's intake form, one thing that I would love is if I said that it was a buyer's intake form, that I don't have to choose these options, right? Being able to skip over the part where it asks me what's the contract status and the client type. If I say it's buyer's residential, maybe we talk with our developers about having it that this is not auto selected, but maybe this field doesn't show up at all in the intake form. Because if you say or you're filling out that buyer's under contract residential, that this field's auto selected, maybe in the settings. Okay. Same thing with our client type. The only time that this wouldn't work is if you're working with dual. So does that mean we need a dual intake form? It's not possible for everyone. Some people already have met their max. And so client type might not necessarily work, but I would love to be able to have contract status as like a setting in the back end. There's a couple things, but that's neither here nor there. I hope that helps answer your question, Brittany. Let me take a look and see if there's any other follow up to that. Okay. I have one TC for a team of 45 agents. Is it appropriate to just have one team then? Yeah, absolutely. Nothing wrong with that. If that TC needs to see all 45 of those agents, there's absolutely nothing wrong with just having a general team name called, honestly, anything you want. The cool thing about this is all of this is like arbitrary when it comes to the names. We could put in whatever values we want. I could name this the Meow Team, whatever I want to name it, right? That's what I would name it. In your case, Brittany, think about whether or not you want to have it split up as listing or under contract or escrow team, right? That way, again, if you wanted to do some more filtering and you wanted to see just all of the transactions that were under the listing team, you can kind of filter it a little bit more, right? That would be probably what I would do. But again, you could have it all on one. You could just have it say, I know that when you guys first create your accounts, it usually has one and it just says my team. That's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If you find that you want to start to expand a bit later and you want to start to update and you want to go, you know what? I think Hannah was right. I think I am going to add in a listing team. And I think I am going to have it that anytime that someone fills out that listing intake form, it's assigned to that listing team. Or maybe you're looking at that public intake form and you're like, you know what? I think I am going to start doing public intake forms. And I want all those intake forms to be assigned to the public intake form first before I assign them out after that. There's nothing wrong with you adding this on as you get further and further in using open to close.
I think the teams right here, that's almost the easiest part to update.
I agree. Yeah.
It's
Teams is the easiest one to like have to come back to. If you realize, let's say you're a year in and you go, yeah, I want to start splitting this up. I have brokerages that have been with Open to Close since we started, and they're like, yeah, I think I want to do a couple more teams. I think I'm going to split it up. Or I've had teams go, I want to combine the teams now. I no longer want to have my listings and under contract separate. I want to bring them together. And that's an easy thing to do too. Teams are the most flexible, easy to do. Okay, what's the next one? How do I edit the order of questions on the intake form? I added the solar section, now it's at the very top. Awesome, great question. So what we're gonna wanna do is number one, first you're gonna double check your fields, your field editor, right? If your fields, let's say you added in the field section and you go, Hannah, it's at the very top. Like that's not right. I don't want it there, right? We're gonna go to groups. We're going to say sort groups, and this is going to allow you to reorder the group. So if solar is at the top here, let's say pretend that, here, I'm going to just pretend that this one is solar, okay? So solar's at the top. You just created it. You just added in those fields. Hannah, this needs to move. I need it down lower. All you're going to do is go to your groups, click on that drop down, drag it down into the place that you want it to. I recommend for anyone who's a new user to pull up one of their contracts and go, all right, what's the order my contract's in? Am I talking about earnest money, financing, and then appraisal? Or am I going earnest money, appraisal, then financing, right? So this is where you're kind of reordering it for yourself to make sure that this populates in the correct order. You'll want to make this decision first before you take the next step, which is going to be updating the layout of your intake form. Okay. So this decision needs to make first. Order your field sections in whatever order makes the most sense to you. Whatever clicks, that's what the order that you should put it. Another thing that I want to show you guys is that we can drag and drop from different columns. I can also drag and drop the different columns to different orders. I usually like to have my intake questions first, just because I know that means that my intake forms are going to populate correctly. And since I'm doing testing and I'm doing this kind of live call with you guys, it's important that we see that in the correct order. So I'm going to go ahead and say close. Once you've reordered that field section, okay, once we've done that part, we're going to exit out of our field editor. We're going to go down to our hammer icon into templates. We're going to go into intake form templates. We're going to open up our intake form and we're going to click on underneath settings. We're going to click on layout. Now, layout is going to be helpful for us if you guys are just like me. When you first started your open and close account, your address was all the way at the very, 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 very bottom. And you guys were like, oh my God, Hannah, every time I fill out my intake form, my address appears on the very bottom of my intake form. Let me show you what it looks like because I just made that update. So we open this up, you choose a team, you choose the user, you pop in the address, and then you go, where's the address? And you scroll all the way down to the very bottom, you go, there's the address. I need this in a different order. I want my address to show up right underneath my contract title because I need to add in the county, or I need to add in the unit, or I need to add in something else, or I just want to make sure that that they put themselves in the right fields. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to go over to the layout. We're going to locate that address, and you can do, and this is a shortcut. If you're on a Mac, it's going to be Command F. If you're on a PC, it's going to be Control F. This lets you just search the page. And if I start to type an address, let's say I'm scrolled up here, here we can see one of two. And if I click on this arrow, it's going to take me down to where address is. So now I can click on those six dots and drag it up to the very top. Depending on what kind of computer you have, you might need to like drag it and then scroll up and then drag it and then scroll up. Sometimes if you're just using a mouse pad, which I would definitely recommend getting and investing into a nice mouse, let me know if you need tech recommendations. Kelly is like a wizard when it comes to the tech. So if you guys are like, oh, I kind of want to I want to get a little fun with my tech, not just have like a keyboard, but I want to have a fancy keyboard, or maybe I want some other fancy things. Kelly, I'm not even kidding you. She's got the coolest setup that I've ever seen. Um,
Thank
but
you,
we would
Hannah.
drag it up to the top. It's true. It's true. When you showed me what you have, I mean, I was like, I think I need to do that. I think I need to get a Steam Deck so that I can just press a button
Yeah.
and it populates what I need it
I
to
have
populate.
Steam Deck, Steam Pedal. I have a Huon pad. I have an 8 hotkey mouse. That's a trackball.
Yep.
That's an index finger, and my keyboard also has hotkeys and whatnot on it too, and changes.
Kelly's got the setup, dude. She's got key bindings for copy paste
Oh
instead of
yeah.
us doing it the manual way. She's
I
like
push
one button, it's
I
done,
push a
it's
button
copied.
and this whole email
And it's
types itself.
exactly, yeah. So there's a lot of like cool stuff if you guys are ever like, I kind of want to upgrade my tech deck, my physical, not my software deck, but my tech deck. Reach out. Kelly's probably got a lot of great ideas for you. But see how when we move the address, now when I pop in my contract address, we'll see that address just below. So it's updating the layout. Okay. So you'll update your field sections first, get that into the order that you want to, head over into your intake form, and then update your layout. And no worries, Brittany, that's the whole idea behind Wednesday Workshop. We will answer them until we get through all of them. Now I'm going to tackle one of the hardest questions that I think Todd has ever asked me. Um, so I'm gonna do my best. I've been really thinking about it, and I probably should have powwowed with Kelly before this, but we can definitely yap about it. If anyone needs to hop off, absolutely feel free to. Make sure you guys take care of your bodies. Make sure you hydrate, get up, stretch, do all of that, because we might be here for another at least 5 to 10 minutes talking about this. So we got a question from Todd asking about scheduling an email 3 years from closing date. Okay. So how would we set that up? Now, it's difficult for me because when we talk about that days field, right? Let's say we had it associated with a days field, so earnest money due days. And we talk about that days field here. Technically, I think I have a limit to the number of days that it can possibly schedule out. Let's see. I know that there is. Maybe there's not. Todd? I don't think there's a limit to this, buddy. You had said that in your email. I'm pretty sure that you'd said that there was a limit.
So
This just went out to 3,000. So
he said the days limit, but it was in something. It wasn't the days field.
I
Sorry.
wasn't in the days field there
Yeah.
because if we're talking about property triggers, okay, we're saying that we're talking about property triggers. Okay, let me build out a property trigger, and we'll say that it's going to go based off of earnest money due. And I say I want to send out an email, and this is going to go three. Yeah, actually, here, let me see if I can boost you up.
That's what it was. It was the days field inside the trigger.
In here, it's in the trigger.
Yeah. So I actually
Okay,
had an
so here,
idea for
actually, let
this.
me go through this. Like, let's do it. Let's pretend it's earnest money. I mean, it would never be earnest money, but let's say it's earnest money, just so that we can have an email template with that. And we talk about the date, the due date for it, or the contingency date for it. What I would probably do here is I would have a date field that says something like 3 days after, or 3 years after, or 3 year follow up, right? Something like that. So that way here I could say, well, I want this to come out the same day as my 3 days out. Okay, so I grab that date and I say update. Oop, choose the time. Sorry, let's say 8 a.m. I want this email to go out and say update. And so now this is going to go out the same day as that date, 3,241 in the year 3,241. Let me see. I have to do math really quickly. Give me a
3
moment.
years is 1,095.
3 years is 1,095.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Todd. There we go.
Mhm.
Update. So now that updates. So this is probably what I do. Instead of having it that you're putting it in the contingency in the days field here, I would probably have it built off of this. Now, the cool thing about having it built off of this, right? And this is where date templates, and I think that Kelly, didn't you message me literally that?
Yeah, so my thoughts were is because you have to take the step to calculate, and I didn't want a calculator or anything, but date chaining was my thought. You would
Mm-hmm.
have to create a few extra fields, but you could kind of hide them and ignore them kind of thing. And then do a like a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, and then date chain it, and then do the contingency off of that date chain. But have the system calculate it for you because yeah, I didn't want to grab my calculator to calculate how many
How many
days
days? Yeah.
every time I
Well,
needed that.
the problem
Because
that
I would.
I tried to do a date, I tried to do a days field in the date template, and it's restricted to 3 characters as well.
Is it?
So
Yeah.
maybe that's where the date chaining has to come in.
Maybe it has to go based off of the first one, and then you could do the second one, the third one, the fourth one kind of thing.
Yeah. I was very confused as to how come you were able to put in 6 digits, but I didn't try it as a field. I
As a
tried
field.
a template.
And
Date
interesting.
field. I'm gonna try to build out something just really messy. And this is why when I tell you guys, like, do not, maybe don't use my examples sometimes on here because I get a little crazy and I'm trying to
Oh gosh, you
congratulate.
wouldn't want to see my test account either.
Because I mean, we're rocket scientists over here trying to figure this out. Because, and I mean, let's be honest. What would Hannah say? What would Hannah say about this? Hannah recommends you don't use open to close as your CRM. So usually I wouldn't recommend having emails something like 3 years later, I'm going to reach out with the seller or the buyer and I'm going to congratulate them on the thing. Sometimes I'm like, you should have that in your CRM. Open to close is not a CRM. Don't do it in open to close. But if you really need to, in Todd's situation, he's building this out for a client, the client wants it. We're going to try to meet that expectation, right? If you guys truly need to, then there's nothing wrong with doing this. I would just probably prefer that you guys were on the scale plan. I don't even know if you could do it with tasks. Can you put it in that number of days field for tasks? Todd, do you know? Did you check it with tasks?
I don't know because this is a scale client, so I didn't even
Okay.
try.
We didn't even try. Yeah, yeah, I figured. Because it's kind of a toss up. But here, so first year, congratulations, second year, congratulations, third year, congratulations. This is just my days. So I have my yearly follow up. The daisy chain that Kelly is talking about is if we go over to our hammer icon into templates and we go down to our, where are you? Date templates, and we edit that date template. Again, when you guys are talking about date templates, remember we want all of the possible dates on one date template. It doesn't matter if they're applicable or not. If you say, well, the inspections are waived, Hannah, don't I need it separately? No, no, no. It's okay. Have it on there because if the inspection date isn't on the property, it's not going to get scheduled. And it shouldn't be on the property if you say that inspections were waived, right? That's the whole idea behind using that conditional logic. So in this case, I would say I want to add on my first year, my second year, and my third year. So when Kelly says we're going to daisy chain it, right? What we're going to do here, and I'm saying daisy, but you probably didn't say that because that's what I think of whenever I think
Oh,
of chain.
same. Date chain, daisy
Daisy
chain. It
chain,
starts with the
right?
D, D-A-I.
Yeah.
It's okay.
So
Same
first year,
idea.
congratulations. We would want to do 365. I'm going to say calendar days after the closing date. And then here, I'm not going to no NA, and then NA, right? We don't need, I mean, we could say count federal holidays if we want to, but we would want to skip those. So that way it actually lands on that closing date. We'll say update. And then we would want to grab second year congratulations. So we'd want to say 365. Oop. If my numlock was on 365 calendar days after the first year congratulations. And we want to update that. And then we go to third year and we say 365. Oop. 365 calendar days after the second year. So what we're doing here is we're daisy chaining it. So we have that closing date, and then we have the first year that will update the second year and then update the third year. So now I'm going to go to a property and we're going to take a look at it on the property. So I'm going to go over to my buyer's UC. I'm going to click on manage for my fields. I'm going to make sure that I add on. So I always unselect remove select section first, and then I select my fields, and then I say update. And then it doesn't work for me. So I have to do it again. Hmm. How come it's not? Oh, I'm so silly.
You're in the
I'm a
wrong.
goofball. It probably did work. It's just on
Yeah.
our intake questions
Yep.
here.
Sorry.
The daisies. Sorry about that, guys. So it was on here. It was just on a different field section. I was looking at the transaction details going, why isn't it there? Because it's on my intake questions, right? So once I have that on there, I'm going to click on this drop down. I'm going to go to defaults and settings. I'm going to scroll to the bottom. I'm going to choose my date template. Sorry about that. I'm going to select that date template. It's going to show me all of the possible dates that it could possibly go through. And I'm going to go ahead and say update. This is me updating it after the fact. If I'm using my intake form and I say I want those dates to come on, even if I say I want them to come on afterwards, okay, as long as I've made that update to my date template, it's going to be for all future transactions that have that date template applied to it. So if you need to retroactively update past ones, you'll have to reapply the date template. For all future transactions, that date template's going to be there. So I'm going to scroll up. We'll say close. Here now we see those values. And so now, Todd, now you can go into your triggers and you can build out a trigger to say, I want to send out an email that goes X amount of days after the third congratulations to say, it's been 3 years since you moved into your house. You like it still? Hopefully you bought it, whatever it is, communication that we want to say. I think that that's probably the fastest way about it.
The thing I was concerned about with the solution that was suggested was just give them another field to fill out. And
Well,
I wanted to avoid that. This is much better because this is just
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
In this
Then you don't
case,
have to think about it.
yeah,
right.
they don't have to fill it out at all. In fact, like
Exactly.
Kelly said, technically you could have this hidden
Yep.
in your, remember how I said, like, there's some fields that we're probably going to reference once and we're never going to look at them again. This would
Right.
be a field where we'd never look at it again, right? So we could leave
Right.
it on this page here. I could drag it down and
To the
leave it at the
bottom.
very bottom. And as
Yep.
long as those dates are on there, as long as I've made out now we're officially coining the term, the daisy chain in your guys' date templates. Um, we'll make,
You hit it just you hit it but from yourself just by having the transaction details there
I
first.
really
So
did.
you just showed us how to do it
I
right
was like,
away.
where are they? They're not on my property. Oh, wait, whoops. They're hidden here in my intake forms, which is perfect.
I like it.
Cool. Cool.
Awesome.
I don't see any other questions that have come up in the meantime. I know that for some of you guys, you're probably like, whoa, what did they just do? If you ever come back in here, you guys have questions about how to chain link those dates. It's something, it is a really cool strategy that I have seen people use before. I definitely recommend taking a look at it, but there's absolutely nothing wrong. As long as you have one of the first dates filled out, right? I know that closing date is always going to have a value in it. If it's final walkthrough date, I know that final walkthrough date is almost always going to have a value in it, right? So as long as we make sure that we've chained it off of a date that has a value in it, that's like hard coded. Like we could do contract date if we want to. It's been
Yeah,
three
I've done
years since we
acceptance
went under
date.
contract. I went with closing date, but
Yeah,
whatever date
same
you want.
thing. I've done that for tasks too. I've changed
Mhm.
them and had it calculate dates for me based on for tasks like follow-up tasks or things
Yes.
like that because I didn't want to calculate those days either. Anything I can do to get the system to do it for me is something I needed when I was.
Absolutely.
Mhm. So yeah, especially if we do it for task templates, I mean, that makes it even easier. We could do again,
And it
first
was like,
year, congrats.
oh, follow up. Like I would put one date in there for this is when this was sent. And then I would have it like calculate the follow up date for me, which calculated this, that, and the other. And then I didn't even, yeah, it was.
You guys are about to see how lazy I am when it comes to this stuff. Whenever and I think that most of you guys probably know I do this, like I'll clone it if I know it's the same, and then I'll just update the year.
I
Boom,
clone a
just like
lot
that.
inside too.
Cloning makes things a lot easier. I know we get
It
used to
does.
saying add here. Sometimes I see you guys adding in the tasks and then not adding in the property date here. I definitely recommend, like, if you add in the task, add the property date here. You don't need to add the task and then click on the date and then open this up and then fill it out here. There's certain shortcuts. There's certain ways that you can utilize the system to make it easier for yourself. So I'd say third year.
Plus, it
And this
keeps
is
the
us doing it with
colors, the
tasks.
tags, the contact or the task roles, who it's assigned to. I mean, it's a lot of work that's done for
Heavy
you
on the
when
front
cloning.
end.
Yeah.
Heavy on the front end, absolutely helpful. Like when you start using it live, it's 100%. It's one of the best tools. Like if you can get your organization set up in the beginning, in the long run, in a year from now, you're going to look back and be like, thank heavens I added on my colors, or I added in all of my tags, or I added on my roles, so that when I had this team member that I've been working with for years, she just retired. It's so easy for me to just transfer it over to the new person, right? Because I already have all of those tags, those roles, everything set up in my open and close account. We're at time. We're 20 minutes over, so I'm going to let you guys go. As always, if you guys are looking for more webinars like today's webinar, you're going to go to our Learn tab, webinars. You'll see some here. If you're new, if you're old, I still recommend coming here and checking out our on-demand webinars. These are going to be great for if you guys need that little just refresher. What does Hannah talk about again, right? This is where I would go, specifically for intake forms, since we talked a lot about that today. If you're like, I am not a webinar watcher, Hannah. I will fall asleep if I listen to your voice, which I have heard that. I take it as a compliment. I think of it as like ASMR, if you guys if you guys know what that is. But if you guys are not watchers, you're more readers, you're going to head over to our person icon. You're going to go to Support Center. And right up here at the top, we've got Onboarding Series. And you can select that. And all of these 101 articles, they go over the same kind of information. I write it out, and then these videos are a little bit more digestible. So this is like 7 minutes, right? Instead of a 30-minute video that you have to sit through. So this might make more sense. Or if you go, I just want to look about intake form conditions. Here's intake form conditions. Or I just want to learn about intake form triggers. Here's intake form triggers. And then I also write out, to explain some of the concepts in it as well. Other than that, I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Make sure you get up and stretch. I know you've probably been sitting for a while now, so make sure you get up and stretch, do some jumping jacks, get your heart rate up a little bit. Don't just walk in place, but actually move your body. That's going to help you guys feel a little bit more energized. Hopefully it'll help out with any blood pooling that might happen in your legs from sitting all day long. I actually am standing up today from my desk, which is why I might sound a little different than I normally do. I'm a lot slower paced, I realize, when I'm standing. Much slower when I talk. But other than that, I hope you guys have a wonderful Wednesday. Thank you for all the questions. Thank you, Todd, for coming on. Thank you, Kelly, for helping me out. And I will talk with you guys next week. Happy Wednesday.